Yeah, please stand, councillors. Welcome, councillors, members of the executive, and the public joining us via live stream. Swan Hill Rural City Council acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pays its respects to their elders, past and present. Councillor Young, I believe, with the brief.
We beseech you, Lord, that we may be granted wisdom, understanding and sincerity of purpose in the decisions we are called on to make for the welfare of the people of the Swan Hill Rural City.
Amen. Amen. Please be seated, councillors. Now, apologies.
Yes, Mr Mayor, Councillor McKay is unfortunately an apology and has asked that be recorded.
Thank you. Confirmation of...
Move that we accept the apology,
sorry,
Mr Mayor.
Oh, second.
Thank you. All those in favour? Everybody in favour? Thank you. Confirmation of minutes. Now, everybody read the minutes and approved they should be a true and correct record.
I'll move that be accepted, Mr Mayor.
And I'll second.
And seconded Councillor Benham. Thank you. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Declarations of conflict of interest. I have a conflict of interest in item B 20.54, Swan Hill Inc. My sister is on the board of Swan Hill Inc. Receptions and reading of petitions, memorials, joint letters and deputations. Do we have any?
No, none received, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Public question time. Do we have any questions from the general public?
No, there have been no questions received this public question time.
Thank you. Rightio, we're on to section B, reports. Approval to relocate council meeting, item B 20.53. Mr McLennan, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report attempts to correct an oversight that should have been done at the July meeting. Council did resolve its schedule of meetings at the beginning of the year and slated that this meeting be held in Robinvale. As a requirement of not having the public present at meetings because of COVID-19, it is a requirement that we live stream our meetings, and we don't have the technology to allow us to do so. Put this report in asking Council to approve the decision, which was really an emergency decision, to shift the meeting to Swan Hill. I should also point out the consequences of this resolution going down, Mr Mayor, is that we would need to all hot-foot it up to Robinvale with the IT equipment that we don't have. We need to be there in half an hour or I have to abandon the meeting because we don't have a quorum. So I'm really hoping this resolution gets up, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr McLennan. Do we have we need a mover, do we? So,
Yes. I'll move the motion, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Yes, and a seconder, please.
I'll second.
Yes, is it procedural, I'm taking it?
Just quickly, I'll just say one thing, that because of COVID it makes it difficult, and I think it's been well received, these streamed meetings, that anyone right throughout the municipality can actually view what we're talking about. So I think it's something for the new council to look at. Maybe this is a venue into the future, and let people right throughout the municipality actually view it. But that's for the new council to decide. But I think it's appropriate that we do, just formality-wise.
Thank you.
Have this report.
Further speakers, a seconder or anyone else? Nope. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Swan Hill Inc. Annual Marketing Plan and Budget for 2021. I'll be 50.2025. I will leave the room. And you'll need another chair.
So,
I'll move the motion that we appoint our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Jeffrey, to take the chair.
I'll second that.
Accept the nomination?
Yep.
Councillor Jeffrey will chair this item. Thank you.
Righto, councillors, over for the Swan Hill Inc. Annual Marketing Plan and Budget for 2020-21, over to Director for Development and Planning.
Thanks, Mr Deputy Mayor. Council's has operated been funding Swan Hill Incorporated for many years to carry out marketing and other activities to support the businesses in Swan Hill. Annually, they prepare a marketing plan and a budget so that council can endorse those to use the funds that council raises through a special rate. This year, it's almost business as usual, although of course the COVID pandemic has altered what Swan Hill Inc will do or may do into the future. Through meetings with Swan Hill Inc, they are aware of the need that they may need to revise the budget and revise their marketing campaign, and that may well need to come back to council later in the year or in the second half of this financial year. The budget is attached, as is the marketing plan. The strategic plan, which is also a requirement of their agreement, has not changed since last year. They did review it and have not made any changes. And they do also have a communication plan for communicating with their members and certainly in trying to improve their membership numbers, which they have had some success over the last 12 months. The recommendation is that Council approve the Swan Hill Incorporated annual marketing plan and budget and the communications plan for 2020 to 2021.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? If there's no questions,
I'll move as per the recommendation.
move Councillor Benham, a seconder. Councillor Young, thank you. Do you wish to speak to that, Councillor Benham?
Just quickly, thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Swan Hill Inc have done and still do a great job of marketing the Swan Hill region, given the parameters that they have to work with. The marketing committee is a highly qualified committee, in my opinion. They do a great job of identifying target markets and marketing to them using the appropriate channels and methods within their budget. So, happy to approve this.
Councillor Young?
I'd just like to comment, probably ever since I've been on the council, I've just been bringing up the issue of the agricultural sector. I know it was brought up many years ago about the inclusion of the agricultural sector into Swan Hill Inc, and it wasn't approved then, but I think now it's actually mentioned in some of the key initiatives to recruit specialists in agriculture when there is no levy, that maybe the Swan Hill Inc needs to investigate some way that they could have, and it has been discussed before, like a minor levy of $20 per farm or something like that, that they could actually involve the agricultural community more into Swan Hill Inc, seeing it's one of the most contributors.
Thank you. Any other speakers for or against? No. Councillor Benham, do you want to close?
Thank you.
Right, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Director Myers, could you get Mayor Moore, please? That's fine.
You'll inform him of the...
Yeah, I've spoken to that.
Yes. Just looking at what's behind your head.
Sorry?
Just checking out what's behind your head.
Yeah.
Fancy bit.
What is it? Oh, the
Adjuster.
I've got some right.
That's right.
So, saves it.
My ears are in the right spot.
Thank you. Welcome back, Mr. Mayor. The motion regarding the Swan Hill Inquiry is put as recommended in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey.
Page 36. Final settlement.
Rightio. Item B, 20.55, Pioneer Settlement, Locomotive and Windmill Relocation Options. Ms Green, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council will recall at its July meeting, Council resolved to construct our place in the Pioneer Settlement site, which will require the relocation of two important items, being the large windmill and locomotive. Two options for each relocation were identified, and some community engagement was carried out last month. We had, given it was short notice and largely carried out online and through local media, over 120 people contributed to the survey, and for the location of the locomotive, it was a split decision on the two locations. So we have certainly talked it through with Pioneer Settlement Management and considered that option 2 behind the general store being the preferred location, which would enable better interpretation and better viewing of the locomotive by the consumers. In terms of the windmill, option 2 was a clear preference by the community and is a clear preference by Pioneer Settlement Management for the same reasons. It allows better interpretation and a better setting for the windmill. The recommendation is therefore that Council approve the new location for the locomotive, which is behind the general store as per option 2, and approve the new location for the large windmill at the Pioneer Settlement to the site where the existing smaller windmill is, which is near the Homestead Dam, and relocate the smaller windmill to near the Vega as per option 2.
Questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor McPhee.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, Mr Green, we received a letter from a member of the public in relation to the smaller windmill at the town in the homestead, believing that it was part of that homestead. Is that the case, or where that windmill come from?
So we went back through our records, so for nearly, well, most items we have record of where they've come from and from whom, and it wasn't associated with Tawanini. It was came separately than the Ironhouse from Gowanford.
Thank you. Another question. In relation to the steam train, we also received an email, or council received an email from Victorian Goldfield Railways based in Castlemaine. Part of that was they're saying that they believe it was the first built of its kind in the state and it has state significance. Is there a likelihood, and if so, a heritage listing put on it, what impact would that have on council to maintain it into the future?
I don't know whether that's true or not, but I've got no reason to doubt that organisation. They're a legitimate train and locomotive enthusiasts organisation. There is no, my understanding is then there's no requirement under the heritage legislation to maintain any heritage listed building apart from a moral one to look after something that is heritage listed, but there's no legislative requirement to do such. But once something is state listed, there is usually funds available as we receive for the GEM to enable us to maintain.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? If there are no further questions, can I have a mover, please?
I move as per the recommendations, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor McPhee. Do you wish to speak? Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Certainly I appreciate the feedback that we've sought from not only the management at the Pioneer Settlement, but as well as the people that were able to participate in the online survey in the week that we had. There's obviously a sort of strong feeling between wanting the left and the same location in regards to the R-Place building, but there's also some good feedback and good direction from the respondents about what their preferred positions are. So we know that it was pretty strongly felt in the community to keep the locomotive train within the Pioneer Settlement, and this is the first meeting we've had where we've actually made a decision on what to do with the train in regards to keeping it, moving it, not moving it. So fully support the recommendation for option 2 for each of the windmill and the locomotive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. produce some meat, Councillor McPhee.
Yeah, well, thanks, Mr Mayor. As a representative of the community, I'll go along with this motion. However, it is disappointing, I think, that the community haven't understood the full impact of the railway locomotive staying in Swan Hill. Going by the Victorian Goldfields Railways, who are based in Castlemaine, they're the recognised body in relation to this. They actually looked at this on their own, and it could have been made a usable and a steam engine into the future, and used along the lines of bringing people to Swan Hill. And I believe that would be a greater economic benefit to the town if it had been the case, at a lot less cost than what it's going to cost us now living in the settlement. But as I said initially, as a representative of the community has spoken loudly. They want it to remain here, but unfortunately it's going to come at a cost to the community, so just be aware of what you wish for into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McPhee. Any further speakers for or against? There being no further speakers, I'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item B 20.56, Community Local Law number 2. Ms Green.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Community Local Law number 2 is basically our amenity local law to ensure that we look after the amenity of the municipality as well as nuisance and other like issues. A review of the local law has identified 4 key things that needed updating, and they are in relation to dangerous unsightly land, open air burning, the droving and moving of livestock, and an update required to the Trading Code of Practice, which provides guidance to commercial and industrial premises on footpath trading and chairs and tables on footpaths and signage. These have been updated in accordance with the Act. They have the new local law, or the local law with the amendments, has been appropriately publicly notified, and no submissions were made. It's now recommended that Council receives and considers the report. Having considered the report, adopt the proposed changes to the Community Local Law number 2 and the Trading Code of Practice, and authorise Council's Public Health and Regulatory Services Coordinator to publish a notice in the Victorian publish a notice and give effect to the adoption, and send a copy to the Victorian Local Government Minister.
Thank you, Ms Green. Questions, councillors? No questions? Okay, can I have a mover, please?
I'll move as per the recommendations, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Young. Would you speak to that motion? Councillor
Yeah,
Johnson.
thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll keep it short. The amendments put forward here for our local law are good improvements to the law. Obviously, there are a number of different clauses and laws within the local law. And sometimes it's hard to get the wording perfect in every scenario. So the amendments here are being made to allow for scenarios that you can't always foresee happening in our evolving world. So, yeah, fully support the amendments. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
No, I think it's all been said.
Any further speakers for or against? There being none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Now, next item B 20.57, and before we get on to that, Mr Linton, I believe this is, after 27.5 years, this will be your last set of reports. I'm sure that all my fellow councillors here and past councillors recognise that the person you are, your exemplary character, your competence, your professionalism and your organisational-wide approach. It doesn't matter what number I ask for, you get it for me. And I'm a bit of a numbers man myself, and I'm sure as a lot of other councillors here would agree. I'm led to believe that you joined us in the 21st of the 12th, 1992. And Whitney Houston had I Will Always Love You, which was the #1 song that year. So you certainly have loved Swan Hill Rural City Council, and you're still here. So congratulations on such a long and distinguished term of service, David. you know, we're going to miss you. The corporate memory that you have within this organisation is just brilliant. And you know, I've been used to just asking you I know I could rely on you to give me an answer within minutes in a lot of cases. And so thank you very much for all the years you've done and put in for this organisation and the community of Swan Hill. You know, you're an unsung hero. So all the best in the future. As a bloke who's retired once and thought better of it, whatever you do, don't stop thinking and don't stop doing things. Just you might move out of here, but you'll be just doing something else. Just from my own experience, keep using your wonderful mind there with your wonderful set of numbers up there. Now, I don't know whether anybody else wants to have a word, like Councillor McPhee, who's one of our most longest-serving councillors present. Les, would you like to say a few words of thanks?
Well, I think you've said it all, Mr Mayor, and I've spoken to David privately.
Personally. Yep.
He's a private sector person, but like, thank you very much for the service.
Yep.
You've done, David. It's been an honour and privilege to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. So, instruments of delegation to the Chief Executive Officer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the kind words. I would like to say that you have been paying me for 27 and a half years, so I haven't been doing it as a volunteer. But yeah, thank you for your kind words. Yeah, I've got a series of reports coming up over the next, how long have I got to drag out for? About the next hour and a half. That relate to a lot of the governance issues, and particularly some relate to the Local Government Act. This report, though, is just a refresh of the delegations to the Chief Executive Officer. It's recommended by Council solicitors that we do refresh the delegations to the Chief Executive Officer regularly, and that's particularly important at this stage, given that we now have a new Local Government Act. It just means that it's less likely to go and be challenged in court, any of the decisions that the Chief Executive Officer makes under delegation. So there's a couple of recommendations there, Mr Mayor, to give effect to the refresh of the delegation of the Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you. Questions, councillors?
One question, Mr Mayor. In relation to the, I think I'm on the right one, the C7 instrument of delegation to community asset committees. Do we have an understanding under the new Local Government Act of how that committee will be made up? Will it be, or is it a committee of council or staff and councils, or does that include community members as well? Similar to the Risk Financial Audit Committee.
Mr Mayor, there's two different committees foreshadowed in the new Local Government Act. One is basically a delegated committee, which would be similar to what we have in place at the Swan Hill Leisure Centre, or had in place at have still got in place at Swan Hill Leisure Centre, but had in place at the basketball stadium. So that's the more formal committee of council, which has delegated powers, etc. A community asset committee, we don't actually really have any of those at the moment, and probably it's up to future councils whether we would, but that is more just like a community hall committee. So currently council leases or has a user agreement in place with all of the users of its community halls. Some councils have that under a committee which is sort of under the auspice of council. So we moved away from that many years ago, thinking that it would be better to give them some independence and let them make their own decisions. So we regulate, council regulates what they do through a user agreement or a lease, and then they basically run the hall. But other councils have a community asset committee, or what will now be called a community asset committee, which has a more formal structure and reports more through that mechanism to council. So that's really the difference.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Hearing none, can I ask for a mover, please? Moved Councillor
I'll
Bennett.
move as per the recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded Councillor Johnson. Would you to speak to the motion?
Only really quickly, and again to reiterate your words regarding Mr Linton, even though we've only known each other for a short time, being an expert in all things corporate services, finance, legal matters, pretty much anything that I'm not an expert in, having you to go to at a moment's notice, and an open door policy has been fantastic, so thank you very much. And the report, I think, spells it all out very clear in a not so clear manner, as is how these things work. Thank you.
Exactly. Councillor Johnson?
No, I'm happy just to second the motion. Mr Linton's heard enough from me on another level today, so thank you.
Rightio. Any further speakers? There being none, all those in favour? Passed unanimously. S6, instrument of delegation, item B 20.58. Mr Linton, please.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. This is a similar delegation, however, this is to council staff members rather than to the CEO, and it's basically the same reasons recommended that we refresh them, and again with the new Local Government Act in place. Some acts require specific delegations to council staff, and this gives effect, the recommendations give effect to that delegated power. It's important that council does maintain some delegated or delegates down some authority to the staff, otherwise we would have to make every decision in the council meeting, and that would become quite cumbersome and delay a lot of matters that would otherwise be dealt with procedurally.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? There being no questions, so I'll have to
Move as per the recommendations, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Benham. Seconder, please. Councillor Johnson, thank you. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
Only just to reiterate Mr Linton's words, that without these delegations, then very little would be able to be done within council on a day-to-day manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson? No. Vote. We'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item B 20.59, 2020 Local Government Community Satisfaction Survey. Mr Linton again.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. This report and its attachment presents the results of the 2020 Local Government Survey, which is a telephone survey conducted under the auspices of the State Government. Surveyed 300 to 400 people across the municipality on a range of issues, and the results are broken down both in the report, but more obviously in a lot more detail in the report that's included with the agenda. It's important that we take note of the perceptions and what the community thinks of us. However, there was always some issues which can influence the perceptions at the time the survey is done. And while I don't want to dismiss the results of the survey, I think it does show that when there are key issues out in the community, it can have a major influence on the results. And obviously over the last few months we've had a couple of significant issues going on, Bromley Road, the outpost building, etc., the aerodromes and other ones. So I think we can see how that reflects in the survey results. So it's important, therefore, that in noting the contents of the survey, that we do consider the implications of that survey. And the new Local Government Act requires us to develop a new community engagement strategy. And I think that's going to be the key to improving the messaging the council gets out in the community, hopefully better informing the community and helping them to understand why decisions are made in a particular way at times. So the report's for noting, Mr Mayor, but also the second recommendation is that we refer the implications of the survey and take that into consideration in the development of the community engagement strategy.
Thank you. Questions, councillors? No questions? Can I have a mover? I'm asking for a mover, please. Yes, move Councillor Young. Seconder, Councillor Benham. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Young?
No, I'll just make a comment that when I originally got under council and I first heard about the results, I thought, gee, that's not very high when you compare it to retail sectors and things like that. But once you've been on council, you realise that they are a bit of a whipping board in lots of areas. And I think like the fact that we've got a 69 for our customer service is very good. So I just want to say I think in reality these are quite good scores, especially when we've got the virus we've got happening and a lot of the difficult decisions, as Mr Linton said, going on. So yeah, I think it's quite good.
Thank you. Councillor Benham.
Just to publicly recognise and thank Sue Smythe and her team, who are the Robinvale customer service team, who scored the highest in that category. They're doing a great job in Robinvale, so that's one positive. And I suppose looking at surveys, having been through numerous surveys in different industries over the course of my life, sometimes it's glaringly obvious where some issues are. Other times, you might be able to take a positive or two out of them, and that's the positive that I'm going to take away from this today. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers? There being none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item B 20.60, Council Plan Progress Report for the fourth quarter of 2019-2020. Mr Linton again, please.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. This continues the reporting against the achievement of the council plan. So effectively, this is to the 30th of June 2020, which means that's 3 years through the 4 years of the council plan. So there's still the current financial year that we're in to achieve the remaining objectives that are in the council plan. So there's the usual detailed report that accompanies the report, which gives a bit of an explanation and a commentary as to where each of, or how we're progressing against each of those objectives, and obviously there's a summary table which sort of shows how many are complete, how many are ongoing, how many in progress, etc., etc. So the report is to help inform council and the community as to how the organisation is progressing in the implementation of the council plans.
Thank you, Mr. Linton. Any questions, councillors? Being no questions, can I have a mover, please?
I'll move as per the recommendations, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Do I have a seconder? Yes, Councillor Young. Thank you. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Jeffrey?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, obviously for the public that are watching, it's a good document to have the oversight of what council are aiming to achieve in the 4 years of this council term, and how they're progressing and any blockers or any developments that have come out of that. So it's a solid plan and look forward to being completed this financial year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
I'd just like to congratulate the staff on all the work that goes into doing all these progress reports and say they've done an excellent job.
Thank you. Any further speakers or against? Thank you. Although we'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Passed unanimously. Item B, 20.61, Audit and Risk Committee and Audit and Risk Charter. Mr Linton again. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. It's, while council's had an audit committee and an audit committee charter for many, many years, and in essence that charter and the members on the committee already comply with the new Local Government Act. The new Local Government Act does require that council review and adopt a new, now called Audit and Risk Committee and an Audit and Risk Charter. So this report has a series of recommendations to give effect to the requirements of the Local Government Act. It also recommends the reappointment of the existing members, in particular the external members, and the reappointment of Mr Pollock as the chair of the committee. The charter is largely unchanged. It's just been reformatted to hopefully try and make it a little bit easier to read and flow through. But also we did do a review to make sure that it complied with the requirements of the Act, which it does. So the recommendations are that we formally establish the Audit and Risk Committee under Section 3 of the new Local Government Act. We appoint the 3 external committee members as identified. We reappoint the 2 existing councillor members up until the term of the council election in 24th of October 2020. And it does recommend a bit of an increase in the fees paid to the members as well. There's a lot of work, a lot of reading that goes into the audit committee. Even though it only meets 4 times a year, it's probably a couple of days' work for each person. So some of these people have professional paid positions, and the previous rates of around about $300 odd really doesn't cut it. So we are recommending a bit of an increase to both the members and the chair in relation to the fee. Overall, it will probably cost council a couple of $1,000s a year, but I think it represents a fairer payment for the amount of work involved.
Thank you, Mr Linton. Any questions, councillors?
No question, but I'll move the motion.
I've just got a question. You've got the 24th of October there.
I was going to amend that motion.
Yeah.
I was going to amend if the motion won't answer your question.
Okay.
The motion was going to be until the end of the council term.
Okay, yes.
Bearing in mind that we could have that extended.
Yep. Okay. Councillor McPhee is moving that
so
motion.
The motion's moved with Councillor McPhee, instead of until the 24th of October, until the end of this council term.
Yep. That's it. Awesome. Rightio. Do we have a seconder?
Oh,
yes,
second.
Councillor Jeffrey. you wish to speak, Councillor McPhee?
Well, just quickly, Mr Mayor, under the new local government act, there's a lot of this stuff we've got to just bring up to date, and that's what this is about. But the audit committee, or now the audit and risk committee, do play an important role in council as a independent arm to just check the checks and balances of the operational arm of council. So it's a very valuable committee, and it's very interesting to be on as a council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
No, that's fine, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any further speakers? We have none. Okay, we'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item B, 20.62, governance rules. Mr Linton again.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, this is another one of the documents that required by the Local Government Act. Currently, and even today, we're operating under Local Law Number 1, which is our meeting procedures local law. Under the new Local Government Act, it's required from the 1st of September to have in place governance rules. So, effectively, we had been waiting for some guidelines to come down from Local Government Victoria and to be reviewed by a committee of them and council across the state. When that turned up, we then compared that to our existing Local Law Number 1, brought it through a couple of assemblies to make sure that we had it about right. But unfortunately, it did mean that there was not a lot of time for public submissions process. So we had only a couple of weeks where public could make submissions in relation to the governance rules. However, it's primarily just how council runs these meetings. So we didn't receive any submissions, and it probably wasn't that unexpected. To be quite frank, I think when we previously went out to Local Law Number 1 in the past, we rarely had submissions either. So the governance rules will determine a number of things, but in particular how we run these meetings. It does reference also the election period policy and how delegated committees will also manage themselves. It is a requirement act that we do have it in place, have governance rules in place by the 1st of September. So unfortunately it will mean that we need to have a decision in relation to the content of the governance rules at today's meeting. Otherwise it will be difficult for council to have a meeting after the end of next week, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Linton. Any questions, councillors? No questions? Can I have a mover, please?
I'll move as per the recommendations, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Jeffrey. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Johnson, thank you. To speak, Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. That's a well put together document given the time frames. And it's a bit dry for the public. It's not overly interesting to read, but it does set down how us as councils conduct in this meeting and this forum, as well as the public when they come in. And it is good to see a couple of opportunities being put in under the new Local Government Act that allows members to come and talk to a particular subject that's on the agenda, and some time frames around that. So I think it's a good step forward for local councils in general. So happy to adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Any further speakers? No. Councillor Young? No. Therefore, we'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item B, 20.63, Council Expenses Policy.
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. Similar to the previous reports, the Local Government Act requires council to develop and adopt a council expenses policy by the 1st of September this year. So again, we've looked at the existing policy that we had, compared that to the guideline document that's issued by Local Government Victoria, and that has led, and also taken through a council assembly, and that has led to the final draft document that's before you, included with the agenda. We went out again for a short period of public consultation in which we received no submissions. So the recommendations are that council note that no submissions were received in relation to the expenses policy and adopt the council expenses policy as presented.
Thank you, Mr Linton. Any questions, councillors? Being no further questions, can I ask the mover, please? Move Councillor Young. Seconded Councillor Burnham. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Young?
No, I think it's all been pretty clearly said by Mr Linton and what was actually in the written information.
Thank you. Councillor
Procedural, thank you.
Any further speakers? There being none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item B 20.64, Public Transparency Policy. Mr Linton, again.
Yes, thanks, Matt. This is the final in the set of governance documents that we need to have in place by the 1st of September, being the Public Transparency Policy. The policy basically is aimed at establishing what documents we'll make available on our website and in some cases for inspection at the council offices. The fact that those documents are then published in this public transparency policy mean that people don't need to go through freedom of information requests, etc., to request this information. It's just made available for people to see at their own volition. So the policy, again, we went out for a brief period of public submissions, received no submissions during that period. So the recommendation is that we note that no submissions were received and adopt the public transparency policy as presented.
Thank you, Mr Linton. Any questions, councillors? Seeing no questions, can I have a mover, please? Moved Councillor Johnson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jeffrey, do you wish to speak? Councillor Johnson?
It sounds like another directive that we need to follow, so we've got the work done in the time frame that we needed to get it done in. So,
thank you. Councillor Jeffrey?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Rightio. Any further speakers? There being none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously.
Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr Linton. Section C, decisions which need action and ratification. Council Assembly's record of attendance and agenda items. Mr McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The usual monthly report identifying the items that were dealt with at Councillor Assemblies and Councillors' attendance record at those assemblies. So that report's provided for information and recommending the Council receive and note this report.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? There being no questions, can I have a mover, please? Moved Councillor Benham, seconded Councillor Jeffrey. Do you wish to speak at all to the motion?
No, thank you.
All right, we'll go to a vote. All in favour? Passed unanimously. Sign and seal report. Mr McClendon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report, as usual, lists the times that the council seal has been used in the last month, and you'll see there a number of variations to lease in relation to a number of public halls and community facilities. So they were the leases that Mr Linton referred to earlier on in response to a question, and also cropping lease and various other matters. 173 agreement, which comes out of a planning matter. So again, recommending the council notes these actions and signing and sealing the documents under delegation as contained in the schedule in this report.
Thank you, Mr McClendon. Any questions, councillors? There being none, can I have a mover, please?
I'll move, Mr.
Councillor Jeffrey. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Johnson. Thank you. Wish to speak at all?
That's
No?
fine, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, pretty much procedural. Right, so we'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Section D, notices of motion. Local government representation on the National Federation Reform Council, item D 20.6. Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move the motion. I won't read it out, but all councillors have been advised in advance, so I'll move the motion as noted in the report.
Yep, do I have a seconder, please? Second, Councillor Young. Yeah, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Obviously there's a solid preamble there that goes with the notice of motion, but basically what we're seeking support of through our federal government is representation on the National Federation Reform Council through the Australian Local Government Association and the Municipal Association of Victoria, just to make sure that any reform that does happen across our nation does include our council as a local government as well as those across the state, because we are the closest level of government to our community, and we support it, and we support our state and our federal representatives as well. So I think it's important that we do have representatives on the table delivering our messages as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
No, I just think Councillor Jeffries just put all the points that we need to look at and very well.
Thank you. Any further speakers? There being no further speakers, we'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Now, item D 20.7, which is Councillor Mackay's motion, she has asked that this be set aside, is it, John?
Yes, set aside until the next meeting on account of her apology.
Being her apology. It's up to council. Someone can move and second, and this can be debated, but I think just in terms of the democratic process that it be set aside. What's the feeling of council? All in favour of setting it aside?
So
thank you.
perhaps a motion that lay on the table until the next meeting.
Okay, moved Councillor Benham that it lay on the table, seconded by Councillor Johnson. We don't need to speak, this is procedural, so all those in favour? Yep, carried unanimously. Any urgent items not included? Any urgent items not included in the agenda, councillors? There being no urgent items, move on to section F, to consider and order on councillor reports. Who's going first today? Councillor Jeffrey.
Nothing to report, Mr Mayor. Stuck at home, so can't go out. Can't do much.
We're all pretty much the same. Councillor Young?
Yeah,
Pretty much the same. Councillor Benham?
I have a few things, even though we are stuck at home. We can still get involved in a few things here and there, Councillor Jeffrey. Before we went back to stage 3 restrictions, I had a catch up with the Robinvale Golf Club with regard to all sorts of things that may or may not pertain to council moving forward. They had a few questions for council which have been communicated through other councillors and the leadership team. On the 30th of July, there was the Yakvik Rural Youth Sector Huddle, which happens obviously quarterly, which was very interesting and some robust discussion, which was great. On the 14th of August, there was a WAC meeting, which was last Friday, and there was another go-to meeting before this one today.
Thank you. Councillor Benham. Councillor Johnson?
Yep, not a great deal on my agenda either. A Swan Hill Inc meeting, the WAC meeting, which Councillor Benham mentioned, and we have had a couple of incidental conversations with potential candidates for the next council election. So I just want to take this opportunity to encourage any of those community members out there that may be thinking of running for council to hopefully they've started, but to also make use of the current councillors if they can and have those conversations and, get as much information as they possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor McPhee.
Oh, look, nothing important, major to report, Mr Mayor. Just a few go-to meetings on top of the COVID, that's all.
Thank you. Pretty much the same here. MOV Virtual Mayor Forum and a go-to meeting with the new local government minister, Swan. That's about it. Thank you. We move that those reports be received. Please, do we do that? We don't. In-camera items, we don't have any?
There are none.
There are none. Therefore, that concludes the council meeting. And I will close the meeting officially at 2:48 p.m. Thank you, councillors. Please remain seated and silent.